Hey Marlene, how are you?
Hey, great to see you.
Good to see you. So I really wanted to have this conversation because I was in a quagmire. I had a client that I decided I was going to use Patrick Lencioni's five dysfunctions, using Wiley's 5B as the foundation for the program that I was building for them. And all my work is game based, so I had it all planned out. I had all the different like tabletop games figured out and the activities, and it's not the first time I've done it. I've done it several times and been really successful with it. And I did not realize until I was in it, even though I did my discovery, I did my needs analysis, I did everything. I didn't realize the depth of the backstabbing and gossiping and sabotage that was going on in the team and the level of distrust and fear that they had. And so I I did a couple of things that I'm really proud of. Instead of, parking lot those issues or just moving on and just sticking with the content, I kept going. I let the conversations and let the activities continue where they need to go and moderated them. And one of the biggest feedback that I got from the team themselves is that they really appreciated that I didn't gloss over. Like there were
Mhm.
members of the teams that actually said, I appreciate you didn't gloss over everything. So I was like, yay, me on that one.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but
absolutely.
yeah, but when I went back to my client and had the conversation with her about her team, and she's like, yeah, this is what my experience has really been. Like, you got to witness what's been happening to me. I said to her, I think we need to try a different tact. And I asked her, give me some time to sort of think about it. I want to break things up and I want to do something different. And so I was sitting and stuck trying to figure out, okay, how do I get past them? And your quote popped into my head. And the next thing I thought of was, I wonder what AI says about Marlene. And just for context, we went to the workshop ourselves and we that talked about AI in the future. And just for fun, I put your name in and said, "Do you know who this is? Do you know anything about her?" And all this amazing stuff came up about you. And I did email you that. But the thing that really hit me was the AI actually said to me, it not compared you with Patrick Lencioni, but it just said that where Patrick has a lot of theory, you had tactical approaches in a different way around clarity. And I just thought that was so fantastic that actually said, I'm going to start thinking about how I can incorporate your work into this workshop. And that brings us here.
Yeah, I was so excited when you reached out, and it's amazing what AI is telling us. And I love Patrick Lencioni, so to even kind of be talked about in the same couple of sentences was exciting because he's has a lot of character and principle and integrity. So
Yeah.
obviously, I admire all of his work. So
Yes.
I was excited for you reaching out.
Yeah, same, same. And so one of the things that you talk about is where accountability breaks down. And I know you have a visual of a chain, which, I'll make sure we get that up. Uh, and that chain talks about where breakdowns happen. Can you speak a little bit more to what that really means? Because I think that's
Yes.
really important for me to understand and also for everyone else.
Well, it was a huge insight for me because I've, been writing books on drama and stopping drama in your workplace and from conflict to courage and all this kind of stuff. And I then started focusing a little bit on accountability because I teach a process for having conversations that brings about the accountability. And as you know, when we do this kind of work, we think deeply about it, we study, we research, we let it, marinate. And I started thinking about there's a lot of thoughts on accountability. We can definitely go there if you want to, but it came to me sort of as an insight that execution, in other words, getting things done, putting things in motion, execution, most leaders that I've worked with think that it's breaking down at accountability. We need to be more accountable. And people are afraid of that word. They think of it as punishment, of being held accountable. And it occurred to me that execution does not break down at accountability. It breaks down at either clarity or conversation. So
Mm.
the alignment chain that I work with is a picture of a chain breaking down, and it starts with clarity, then conversation, then accountability, and then execution. So when we think it's accountability, that's a lagging indicator, because if you're having conversations based on clarity, accountability naturally occurs because you're measuring and you're talking and you're coaching and you're helping, and you're not using accountability as an afterthought, as a means of punishment. And
Mhm.
I've done a lot of research on accountability, and I think it was Culture Partners was saying that 87% of managers don't understand how to create accountability.
Yeah.
That's because of the way we think about it. But accountability is really about the clarity of what we're trying to create, what we're trying to achieve, and then the conversations to keep that going.
Yeah, and that the reason why I bring that up is that the VP kept saying to me that I can't get them to be accountable. And she kept repeating that. And so that's why I said it was so interesting. And that's what made me think about you, because you had said this to me before around that accountability is a lag indicator. And I kept thinking about the fact that in the workshop, when we were doing the work, one of the things that kept coming up was around conversations that weren't being had. And that's why I thought of you, because you have this. Could you share your thoughts around conversations we don't have?
Yes, I thought maybe that was the quote that you saw when you
Yes,
mentioned that in the beginning. So I say that every big problem in an organization can be traced back to a conversation that should have happened but didn't.
absolutely. Yeah. And I will say that I'm in a 100% agreement with you on that statement, because as I was having them do the work, I kept noticing these hesitations
Mm.
or this readjustment of conversations that almost it was like it's like the tip of their tongue, they wanted to say the thing and then they would like retract it. And then I would push a little bit, but there was only so far I could push because there was fear, there was, a lot of anxiety and some other things that were bubbling up as well. And I
Yeah.
kept thinking, that's the problem. Like Marlene is spot on in her analysis. Like Marlene's not even in the room and she's spot on in her analysis that the issue is they are not having these conversations. And that is what's leading to this breakdown, as well as there's no way to have any execution, true execution on what they're trying to build because they're not talking to each other. They're not having real, honest conversation.
Yeah, and there's a few reasons for that, and one
Mhm.
has to do with the way that people, well, first of all, there's just the emotional aspect, right? The nervous
Yeah,
system, and that's happening because of how we're interpreting a potential conflict. So I
yeah,
also say there is no conflict unless there's an inner conflict first. So if you have to have a conversation with someone, let's say that you really like them, or let's say that they're kind of sensitive, and we know they're sensitive, or we had it out last time and it didn't go well, so now there's this fear. That's the inner conflict. And that is because we think of conflict as some sort of war, some sort of someone wins and someone loses. So when I talk about conflict, and I do this for myself too, because I'm a human being too, I have a nervous system. So when I get into conflict of any kind, I remind myself that I must have an inner conflict, the way I'm interpreting something. And that conflict is really, if I think about it, it's only opposing desires, drives, and so we're just like two arrows going like this,
mm-hmm,
opposing drives, desires, and demands. That's how I categorize it in the book. So if I just think of, it's really differences. We have some sort of difference that's unresolved, and I have a feeling that if we can't resolve it, then we're going to be enemies. So if you just say, well, I don't understand their drives, desires, and demands right now, and they don't understand mine, someone has to be curious first. So that's the first way, is you start to interpret it differently when you have that feeling, when you notice that, visceral response. And what I noticed in when I was doing the work and doing the research on writing that book, I called it the three A's that most leaders um, do as a coping mechanism, avoiding,
Hmm.
appeasing, and aggression. And so it's all avoidance though, even though it looks different. So avoiding, people that avoid, honestly, they know they avoid. So they have
Hmm.
this awareness. They go, I will avoid conflict because I think conflict is bad. And that is due to the interpretation. They
Yeah.
haven't expanded their nervous system yet. And so the others that get aggressive, the way they look at it is my way or the highway. Like I'm the boss, so you know what? And new leaders are especially prone to this because they have this idea about leadership. And
Right.
the people that have been leading forever know that they have conflict and know that they're scared and know they're not as good as they want to be. But people that don't know think they're better than they are.
Right.
I'm sure you've seen that too. You know,
Yes.
and then
Yes.
there's the appeasing, which is the most difficult because people that appease, they are people pleasers because they want harmony, and they may justify it by saying something like, well, on the disc or on the whatever tool they're using, I'm all about harmony, so therefore I can't do this. That's the interpretation they
Mhm.
have. And so they appease, and appeasing is just telling people what they want to hear, making promises that you don't keep. So when a leader is appeasing, that's still avoidance based on the fear of conflict.
Yeah.
And so I've
Yeah.
just made it easy by giving those tools to say, where are you on that scale? Or do you know you avoid, do you appease, or do you get aggressive? I would say I'm sort of an aggressive person. And I used to not think of that as avoiding. But what it's avoiding is intimacy, vulnerability, wanting something that you may not get. And so the coping mechanism is I'll just be really aggressive.
Mhm. I love that. And I think how you preface that around curiosity, I think is really important. And I think that is a number one sort of tool and skill that we don't view as important. Because the more I'm curious about how things are affecting me, how I'm viewing it, the more I'm willing to learn about how I show up in the conversation. Because I'm the first person that shows up in that conflict, right? And then having that curiosity around the other person that I have this disagreement with or this conflict with, again, I'm a firm believer in one of my sort of tools around this sort of teaching curiosity to people, because I do agree with you that curiosity is what allows us to then figure out where we are in the three A's, right? And I
Well,
love that you're like,
you know,
you're aggressive. Yeah.
when I got to know you, I thought this is such a kindred spirit. I can tell you're very well developed, that you've really thought about your own values and about what is important to you. And when we take that journey of personal growth, not just leadership growth, because I think leadership growth is at the core personal growth,
Yeah.
and we start saying, well, I'm going to sort of die to some of my behaviors and desires, and I'm always going to look at the role that I played. I may be totally right about something, but I'm still going to look at how I added to the conflict or the perception, or how I was in a bad mood that day and I felt edgy and I snapped a little, or I was sarcastic. As you know me, I'm pretty sarcastic. I want to
Same.
make sure that people that like that, and it's in fun and friendship, not when I'm feeling edgy. And I
Yeah.
had to work on that. That was something I had to work on. Like every thing that we are, there's a good and a bad to it, and we have to understand that we affect other people, and we can't just always say, well, they're too sensitive or they take everything so personally. Well, if they take things personally, then I have to alter a little bit because I want relationships. So I value good relationships and I value integrity. So even if they're sensitive, it doesn't mean I walk on eggshells or avoid. It means that I'm very clear of how my behavior as a leader affects other people.
Yeah. That self-awareness piece. Yeah, we really are kindred spirits because I do
Yeah.
believe that. I constantly tell people, do you want to be right or do you want to be in relationship? And I know
Yeah.
the adage is do you want to be right or do you want to be married? But I've like turned it to relationship because that's really what happens in all of our interactions in the workplace. It is a relationship that we're having with people. And so it's important to recognize that relationship. And I think people don't recognize it. Sorry, my alarm is going off.
That's okay.
You can tell it's live. My alarm's going off.
Yeah.
We forget about those interactions and how important it is to not always be looking at, am I right? And you're absolutely right. I may know I'm right, but how did I show up? Did I show up with this arrogance of, yes, I'm right? Or did I show up with some curiosity around, I may be right, but what's the other view?
Or I see the distinction
Or
because
I
very
see the
often
distinction.
it's a
Yeah.
both and world, and there's some sort of distinction, which I love to talk about distinctions. It's a big part
Hmm.
of my work is distinct. This is how I define it. This is where it's distinct from that. But you know, I was born for this work because my mother and I we could butt heads, and I would say to her, "You are so stubborn," and I'd say, "You love to be right," but then in me saying that, don't I love to be right too? And
Yes,
she would
absolutely.
say, "I love to be right." She was not very well developed. I wasn't interested in that like I was, but she'd say, I do love to be right. It feels good to be right.
Hmm.
For some reason, sometimes I couldn't let that go though. It's like it made me mad that she wasn't wanting to be developed, which is just such a dichotomy of me wanting her to change versus does it really matter? It's funny. It's actually funny. And what if it's just okay that that's how she decides to live? And so we've
Right,
got people like that in the workplace too. Like if it's not really important, if you're arguing about whether someone's shirt that they wore was teal or blue, is it worth the argument? Or is it like, yeah,
right.
maybe it was, I don't know. It was Monday or Tuesday, unless it really matters. Why are we arguing about it?
Yeah. What's the point of that?
Hmm.
I love that. So, in the spirit of sort of opening up and being a little bit vulnerable, I thought it would be kind of fun to talk a little bit about my idea for the session. So, and then sort of get your advice
Okay,
around that. Would you be open to that?
absolutely. And you can either take it or throw it in the trash.
Well, and I also think it's really, I think for people that are sort of listening that might be in this space, internal practitioners, to sort of have an opportunity to talk to an expert and sort of think about how you're building things, right?
Yeah.
I think that's really important as well, just to be able to have that. And so I, whenever I build, I like to start with what I call the one big idea. And so, my idea for this session is to really help the leaders recognize that most of the team drag isn't caused by bad people or bad strategy. It's really caused by the avoidance of conversation. How's that sound to you?
I like that. Yeah, I think there's an identity issue at play too.
Say more about that.
So what I mean is that identity, have you heard the saying structure drives behavior?
Yes, I have.
I've played with that a lot, and it's kind of
Yeah.
a concept you have to like twist your mind around because it's sort of nebulous when you think about it. I think I wrote about that in No Drama Leadership because when I'm interested in something, I want to research it, study it, find my
Hmm.
distinctions. So structure determines behavior, which I know that you are an expert at that because you build games into your programs. That's structure. You're building a
Yeah,
structure
I'm
for
building
people to
structure.
behave
Yeah.
a certain way and to have certain constraints.
Right.
So when you think about, like, I have a house that's older and there's stairs, to climb to get to the bedroom. So I don't fly up the stairs because I'm not structured in such a way to sprout wings and fly up to the bedroom. And I don't, as much as I would love to, and I don't walk through a wall because I can't pass through surfaces and be invisible and then appear suddenly. So the
Right.
structures of my house determine the behaviors I have with how I walk to and from different rooms. That's easy
Hmm.
to understand. We
Yes.
avoid doing certain things because of the environment, the structures, the building, how we have to work. Do we walk to work? Do we drive to work? Do we take a bus, a train? Depends on where we live. That's culture, that's structure. But there's also a structure that's invisible, many invisible structures, which is our desires. Like I will overcome a certain structure based on how I was raised or whatever because I have an invisible structure in my brain to want to improve. And
Right.
so identity is also one of those invisible structures. And what I mean by that is that how you see yourself is going to show up in all of your interactions. And how you see others is going to be how you lead them and how you treat them. So that structure determines behavior. So I think there's some identity issues there where we could say, what am I committed to? When my structure of identity started to change many, many years ago, I had this insight that I wanted something different. I've got a whole story of reinvention. But in one of those moments of inspiration, I said, I am going to be dedicated to improving communication and relationships everywhere. I'm going to live and die on that. That's going to be my who I am and how I show up. And I thought, this is awesome. Wow, we set up some values, we set up a mission, and we live it. Well, it's
Hmm.
not that easy because my normal way of being was, like I said, sarcastic. I'm an eye roller. I would snap at people. And as you've noticed, I'm really quick. I'm a
Yeah.
fast talker. I'm quick in thinking. I process quickly. And if there's something funny to be said, I could just take someone down like an arm wrestler. Well, what happened was I got tested because while I think I'm going to improve communication and relationships everywhere, when I disagreed with people, I'd be like, okay, well, if that's what you think, I'd be like real sarcastic until someone called me out on it. And it
Hmm.
really hurt my feelings. And I thought, wow, we justify our behaviors. They're so sensitive. I was just teasing people that know me, love me. And I'm
Hmm.
going around asking other people saying, you think I'm funny, don't you? You know my heart. Like I would, and she just called me out and they're like, yeah, I know it's ridiculous. Until one day I was asking someone else, and I had been in this personal development program, and I said, don't you think it's ridiculous? I mean, I don't really care about it. And she said, well, you actually do care about it because you keep talking about it. And
Yeah.
it happened 3 weeks ago. So I'm repeating the story because I haven't resolved it. There's an inner conflict with who I say I want to be, but how I really want to be. And
Right.
so she said, you do care about it because you've brought it up several times, and I've heard about it several times already. And you're asking, does it matter? But I've got a different question for you. Does rolling your eyes help you improve communication and relationships everywhere? I went, oh my God, that was like a stake in the heart. So it's not about whether you're right or wrong. Does that align with the values you say you're about? So
Yeah.
that's what I mean about sometimes when there's that much sort of backstabbing and gossip and team issues, we can say, well, we got to build trust. But at the root of that is, do you trust yourself? Like,
Yes.
like, do you know how to be even in that environment because you have to overcome that structure? So I always think there's a little bit of identity where there's a trust issue or where there's
And I
backstabbing.
love that. I love that, Marlene, because in the first session that I did, that was the root of where I talked about trust. I mean, I did the vulnerable based trust exercise, the personal history exercise that Patrick
Yep.
always recommends to do. I did that exercise with them, and that was interesting. Some of the things that came out of that exercise. And then I talked about the fact that we can't trust others until we can trust ourselves. And so that was interesting too, because I did get a lot of pushback on that. And
I bet you did.
I got a lot of pushback on that. And then so I really did push around understanding what it means to trust yourself and what that truly looks like. So I love that you brought that up because, again, that sort of validates I was on the right path.
100% you're on the
Yeah.
right path here. And here, I want to share this story because you'll love
Yeah,
it. You'll love,
please.
love it. And I've watched lots of shows like when Oprah was on about trusting yourself, and they're like, no, because he screwed me over, and I'm going to date him, or they did me wrong in the workplace, and so I can't trust. Well, there's truth in that. It's not that that's not truth, but it's at one level of consciousness. It's not that it's not true. It
Hmm.
is factual. It happened. You can name dates and times and people. That's not the bigger question though. So this became so obvious to me. I was on a trip going to Seattle from here where I live in Springfield, and I was flying there with a friend. Had a speaking engagement, and I was sitting in the middle, and my friend was sitting at the window and on the airplane, and this other woman that we didn't know was seated on the aisle, and we were in that row where they ask you, hey, if we have problems, will you kick out the door? No one's going to say no, but they have to ask you that question. And so I'm nodding, yes, we'll kick out the door if there's a problem. And my friend Michelle said to the other woman, said, so do you trust me with your life? And the woman said, no, not at all, but I trust me. And I went,
Oh,
love it. In other words, I don't care if you're competent or incompetent, I'm getting out the plane. You know what I
right,
mean?
right.
So like, I trust me, I will get out some way, whether you're saying you will or won't. I'm not putting my trust in you. So I
Hmm.
think that in that, as we get to know ourselves and we become the leaders we want to be and the people we want to be, do I trust myself not to get triggered into sarcasm and eye rolling whenever I want to do it,
Right.
because it feels good to disperse that energy when you have the energy of needing to be right. But if I trust me, I can say, that's plan B. Plan A is going to be to get curious or to go away for a moment and grab hold of myself and say, I got to get my nervous system back to zero here. So I think trusting myself is about overcoming the coping mechanisms that we have to maintain our egoic need to be right or to win over someone.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, when you trust yourself, you then have this ability to be able to say, I believe in myself. I understand what my skills are. So now I'm not trying to be in competition with you.
Yeah.
Now I'm not trying to one up you or prove that I'm better or whatever, that I'm just comfortable in who I am. And I think that's the hardest part for leaders to
It's hard
really,
for entrepreneurs too, isn't it? Like,
absolutely,
because we
yeah.
are around the best and the brightest. You and I, we go to things, we invest in ourselves to learn and to be better and to give back to our clients. And we have to set ourselves up for knowing that people that have different skills and aptitudes and different backgrounds and life experience, maybe I used to say, well, they started with a yacht and I had a rowboat, one oar, and no map. So like, that's just a way to compare yourself and be better than someone else because they had more privilege or more opportunity. But the truth is, that's their life. It is not yours.
Yeah.
And so for me, I've had to really work on overcoming that need to compare myself, either from the perspective of making myself better or making myself worse. There isn't comparison really. It's your life. So the
Yeah.
question is, who are you in relationship to this? I think it was Neil Donald Walsh in Conversations with God, a book that was around a long time ago. I thought that question was really profound of who are you in relationship to this? So someone's shining, so someone is winning, so someone's looking great. What are you going to do? Talk bad about them, cower down, try to outdo them? What are your choices? Because
Right.
I used to say, by your choices, you reveal your commitments. And if you
Yes.
don't recognize the choice, then you can't be responsible. So by your
Okay. That
choices.
was a quotable right there.
So
That
which
was a
one?
quote. The
Which
by
one?
your choices, you reveal. Oh my God, that was a quotable right
Yeah,
there.
yeah. By your choices, you reveal your commitments.
Your
And here's the
commitment.
other
Yeah.
part of that. I say that responsibility, we all say we believe in it, but at the
Hmm.
core of responsibility is first the recognition of choice. If
Yes.
I don't see that I have choices, how in the world can I possibly be responsible? If I'm the victim because someone else keeps overshadowing me, doing me wrong, hurting my feelings, making me feel sensitive, if it's always them, and circumstances, then I haven't recognized my choices, and therefore I can't really be responsible.
It's funny you say that because one of the pushbacks that I got uh, from from several people in the group was around choice and responsibility and trust because we were in trust. And I say that tongue in cheek, we were in trust because I don't know how many of us were in trust.
But we're
Um,
trying to get there, right?
right, but we're
We're
trying to get
exploring
there.
it.
One of the things that people push back on was, but what if my livelihood is dependent upon this person that I don't trust or I don't think is doing right or they're affecting my livelihood. So I don't want to tell them the truth. I don't want to have the difficult conversation with them. And I think that is such an interesting thing because yes, it's true that when you're in a workplace or in any situation, if it's a client engagement, that your livelihood is dependent upon that particular situation. But I disagree that you don't have choice in that you don't have agency. And I'd love to, and I did give a response, but I'd love to hear what you think about that statement.
I'm dying to hear your response
I'm
too.
going to tell you in a minute. I'm going to tell you
Okay,
in a
okay. So
minute.
when someone says, my livelihood is dependent upon them,
Mm-hmm.
So at the lower level of consciousness, that may be true,
Mm-hmm.
but it has to do with how you see yourself. If you really believe that someone else is responsible for your livelihood, really, like you don't trust your abilities to have another job, you don't trust in your resourcefulness, you don't trust, and you also have a story that you're making up about the way that you're going to say it to them.
Yeah.
Because if you had a different story, and in narrative coaching, this isn't mine, but and I can't remember the man I took it from, so it's not fair, but I'm going to say it. Your story is the source of your suffering.
Oh,
So, and
we're
if
gonna
you're
have to circle back and find out who
your
that's from because
story
that's
is
so
the
good.
source of, yeah, I took the course in
Yeah.
narrative coaching, that your story is the source of your suffering. And if
Mm-hmm.
that's true, then the story, in other words, what you're telling yourself, how you're interpreting, same thing I talk about conflict. If my story about conflict, that any kind of conflict means that I'm going to lose my job, or that you are so sensitive that you can't handle it, that I'm responsible for every feeling that you have, and that if I make you feel bad, you're going to fire me, like that's a story that needs to be broken apart,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not true. It's not even grounded in truth. There's just fear. It's fear based, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not serving the purpose of an outcome, which is better performance, better team collaboration, better workplace harmony. Like it has to serve an intention, an outcome. And most of the time, we human beings don't even understand our intention. We say I intend, and we don't really mean it. Gary Zukav said, if you don't understand your intention before an interaction, you'll understand it afterwards. So
Yeah.
when someone says, well, the reason I can't is because they are responsible for my living. On the smallest level, there's some truth in that. On the real,
Yes.
your truth is as high as your level of consciousness. So you've got to
Mm-hmm.
elevate your level of consciousness there, and to say, would it benefit them to know something where they could lead better if I said it in the right way and if I had the skills to deliver it differently? And
Right.
usually the answer is yes. So it really has to do with my competency as an interpreter and a communicator, is how I would say it, just thinking of it off the cuff. What
Okay. I love that. So this is what I did. So because I'm a firm believer in experiential learning, that I told a story, a true story about myself. So I feel like if I'm asking you to open up, I need to open up. So in that, when that came up and several people were shaking their heads yes, like they were in agreement with the statement that this particular person said, I first acknowledged that there is some truth to that, although I did not eloquently acknowledge it the way you just did. So I will own that. But I did say, yes, that is true. There is truth in that. However, there's also a way of communicating with someone so that you still feel safe, but you're getting your point across. And if you feel like that's not happening, you do have choice to walk away.
you
And so I
do.
told I told the story of, and this was when I was a young leader. Well, not that young of a leader because I had already been in leadership positions probably about 10 years at that point. Yeah, about 10 years I had been in leadership positions, and I had taken a position where my boss got let go and I reported to the CFO, and that CFO got let go and a new CFO came in. And I'm comfortable in saying where that CFO came from because that person later apologized to me. So
Wow.
yeah, yeah, years later. So the CFO, I was in higher education. I was at that point, I was the director of financial aid at an institution, and I reported directly to the CFO. And this new CFO that came in from McDonald's. So he had zero higher education experience. And he came in very arrogantly and he's like, we're going to do it this way. We're going to do it this way. And I constantly would butt heads with him because the things he wanted to do or implement went against federal regulations.
Wow.
And so I constantly was the bad guy in conversations because I was constantly the person that said, we can't do it this way because, and then cite a regulation, right? Like it was, I'm like, I would appreciate, and I'd say to him, I appreciate the creativity in the thought process in that. However, we can't do that because of. And at first, he was a little bit acceptant of it. Like he did the eye roll, he was annoyed. And then it escalated. He was openly had open animosity with me in our executive meetings with the other departments. And so I immediately was like, oh, this is, like I felt really uncomfortable about the interactions. And I kept saying to myself, okay, what do I need to do here? And I reached out to my very first boss, who was a mentor to me.
Mm.
And I told him, I'm like, here's what's happening to me right now. And my first boss was really honest with me. And he used to call me kiddo. And he said, kiddo, couple of things. One, you're a woman. And right there, from the world he came from, that puts you on a deficit. And I was like,
Absolutely.
okay, fair. I already knew that, but thanks for reinforcing that, like for saying that to me. He's like, two, you're really smart. He was like, sometimes you don't realize how smart you are. And I didn't take that well, but it's okay. I was sort of like, oh, am I? Because I don't feel very smart right now. He's like, no, no, no. He's like, he was my boss in my very first
And
job.
he's telling you like it is from his
Yeah,
perspective, and you've
right.
got to value that.
Right. And so I kind of like I did the thing that we tell people not to do, that I look
Oh,
back at my younger
shucks.
self and go, "Oh, why did you do that?" But I was just like, "Oh, no, no." But he said, "You're really smart and you're quick." And so he said, "What I want you to do is slow down a little bit.
Mm,
Pause. Don't say the thing out loud right away. Pause."
mm,
And he said, if he's being openly has that open animosity towards you, pull him aside, have a private meeting. So that
right.
way, because he might be feeling embarrassed, that
Right.
there's a part of him that recognizes right now you know more than he does about
Yeah.
this world. And he may not have the humility to
Right.
accept the fact that you know more than he does. So don't openly
Battle with
fire
him
off.
and make him
Right.
look bad. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Making him look bad. So take that step back and think about it's like your job. He goes, even though it doesn't feel like it, but your job, one of your jobs is to always make your boss look good. And
Love
he
it.
said, you used to do that naturally with me. And he said, when I would take you into meetings and things like that, I always felt like you made me look good. He said, but I'm not ego driven. I didn't feel like I believe that as the leader, I'm not the smartest person in the room. I need the smartest people around me. That was his philosophy. And that's where I learned that from. Like most of my leadership skills I got from this gentleman. And he's like, but not every leader. He's like, now you're in a situation where you have a leader that's not like that. That leader is ego driven. That leader needs to feel like they're the smartest person in the room. And so now you need to learn how to manage your leader if
Mm,
you want to stay in this position. And then he said to me that you don't have to stay in
right.
because you are skilled enough to leave and go find something else.
Right.
The only barrier you have right now is your belief that you could do that, but you can't.
I, oh my, that is a
Yeah,
fantastic
it's a good guy,
story.
right? It's a good
It's
guy.
so, so good.
Yeah. So then I was sort of taken aback, and he said, "You are limited by you right now. You are not limited." He was like, "I know you're concerned because you have to support your family and you have all these obligations and that's weighing on you." He's like, "But the truth is you have control over the situation. He doesn't control your livelihood, you do. And the
100.
moment you realize that, you will feel empowered and emboldened. But your first step as an employee is your job is to make your leader, manager look good. Because if they look good, they're now willing to work with you because you have not put them in a negative light with
You
those above them.
and you created safety. So it's not up to him to create safety for you. It's up to
Right.
you to create safety for you. And in doing so, creating it for
Right.
him.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's the piece. And so when I came out of the story, I said, a lot of times we talk about psychological safety and we talk about the leader having to create the psychological safety. And I don't disagree with that. I think absolutely my role as a leader is to create that safety. But if I have a leader above me who does not have that skill set, and I'm a leader of a team below me, my responsibility is to create psychological safety for myself, for my team, and for the person above me. And
Wow.
that's really important. And that's what I shared with them. Now, I had some people in the room that were like, okay. And I had some people in the room that were like, this is BS. No way. But I hope that over time and over working with them, that they'll come to realize the importance of the true definition of psychological safety is not having someone else create it for you, that you are responsible for your own psychological safety.
I
And
hope
that's
you write.
not to victim blame. That's not to blame victim. That's just to recognize I, as a human being, have choice. I can walk out of a situation. And to finish that story, what I said to them, what ended up happening is I took my mentor's advice and it still didn't go well. The guy was super ego driven and our relationship had eroded. And so I put in my resignation with no job to go to and a family of four to take care of. I put in my resignation and I was stressed beyond belief because I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. On the drive home that night that I put in my resignation, a girlfriend called me and asked me if I knew anybody that would be interested in a position at another institution that had just opened up and they hadn't even like posted it yet. And I said, "Well, I'll be interested because I just quit my job."
That's
I got that
amazing.
position. And again, I mean, that was a lot of things coming together for me, but the biggest lesson there was I need to trust myself.
I mean, wow, wow, wow. There's so many threads of that that I want to comment on.
Good, go for
Oh, first of all, I think you need to write an article about that story and about
it.
psychological safety because here's what I'm seeing in the workplace.
Hmm.
So every time we have a great idea, people take it off the cliff and change the meaning of it.
Hmm.
So now, if someone even gives feedback about performance, I don't feel psychologically safe. See, I think that's manipulation. People are doing that now, right? And making their leader responsible for their well-being 100%. And it doesn't work that way. It works exactly like what you said. You had that experience for a reason so that you can teach and consult and do the work that you do, as I
Hmm.
have had experiences like that too, and we get the lesson we're supposed to teach. And so one part of that that I'm hearing is that you decided that your intention was going to be to support him, right? Or to
Yes.
try to, but he didn't want to do that. He already saw you as an enemy. He had an ego need to be better than you'd be, right? Whatever it is, we can't know for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
But if someone was in that situation, and this is really like, I've not been in your situation like that. I have a parallel to that. But I would say if I were coaching someone that was feeling that way, I would say your back pocket line is my intention is to support you. So
Yes.
my intention is to keep us from a legal problem.
Yes.
Sometimes when we state our intention, even if we have the intention, sometimes people are going to see what they're going to see. So
Hmm.
I love that you were so clear on that, and that you were so clear after the mentoring that you did have value, and that you trusted yourself so much that without a net you decided. And there's something I've learned, and this is a sort of a universal energetic component. It sounds so woo woo when I say that, and I'm just okay for people to judge it because I've experienced it as true. There's a place where change happens. There is a place where change happens, and it is not due to someone else or the circumstance. It's a state of willingness. You created that willingness within yourself. So I
Yeah.
call willingness the fulcrum point of change. When you get that clarity and you take that leap, the universe will conspire to give you what you need.
Hmm. Yeah. I'm a firm believer that the universe conspires for you, not
Mhm.
against you.
Always.
I'm a
And it
firm
won't
believer
seem
of
like
that.
it when you're in the fear, and it
Oh,
won't seem
yeah.
like it when you've got the story that they're responsible for my livelihood and it's not fair. I had a great boss,
Hmm.
now I don't. If you stay in that story, you keep perpetuating the very thing you don't want. But
Yeah.
if you start to say, well, what are my choices? And you said to yourself, I've tried and it's not working as much as I wanted it to work. Even the advice from someone seasoned did not work, which is saying to you, you've got a bigger choice to make. And you did it.
Yeah.
And look what happened. I mean, that's really an amazing story
Oh,
that you
yeah.
made.
I mean, yeah. And I think that was it, as I reflect back, that was the moment, that whole situation, reflecting back on it, was the moment that I truly can say I trusted myself. I think prior to that, I had glimpses of trusting myself
Mhm.
throughout my life,
Yeah.
but that was the moment where I could really look back on my life and say that was the moment that I really cognitively recognized that the most important relationship that I have in trust is me.
Always.
Yeah. And that's from that experience, I was able to, when things didn't go the way I wanted them to go, that I trusted in my own ability, even when people didn't trust my ability. I trusted in my ability. And I also began to recognize that even the people who seemed like they didn't trust my ability still had something that they saw in me that said, oh, she has value. But more
Absolutely.
importantly, I didn't really care about that. I cared about that I knew I had value.
And that's that inner conflict I talk about. You know, there was probably this inner conflict. If you want this to work out, you're seeing the situation for what it is. It's not wrong. You're getting the mentoring. You had a different conversation with yourself, a different clarity. And
Hmm.
that clarity in that conversation, it was a result in you taking this step, which I wouldn't call it accountability because you can't be personally accountable, but you can be
Right.
personally responsible. And you did that and it worked out. Like there was execution immediately for you to get that other job. I'm very interested in the part where he apologized, though, if you
Yes, I was going to say, let me get to that, and then we're going to have to wrap up because
okay.
we're close on time. But yeah, so years later, someone that worked for me actually had worked for him because he stayed at that institution, worked for him at that institution. And just by chance, that person who worked for me had gone to that institution because I was working in a sales environment, and they happened to mention that I was their boss. Just side note, sort of mentioned, oh, I'll have my boss come, and then said my name. And according to this person, he froze for a minute and he said, do you think she would be willing to come? Because I really would like to talk to her. And so that person said, yeah, I will, I'll set that up. And so she came to me and she's like, she didn't know any of the backstory. She just said, do you know so and so? And I said, yes, I do know who that is. And she's like, well, they're at blah, blah, blah institution. And I told them that I could bring my boss to talk about negotiating the thing. Would you be open to coming? And I was hesitant
Mm.
because I thought, oh, what is this going to be? You know, is this like he's going to have some revenge and we won't get this business? And then I said, you know what? Yeah. Like all of a sudden, I got really brave and I went, yeah, sure, I'll come with you. Set up the meeting. I walked in. He was there with his new director and some other people. And he stood up, shook my hand, and said, the first thing I want to say to you, Genevieve, is that I'm sorry
Wow.
that it took a lot of issues and we ended up getting audited. Like I didn't even know the backstory. We ended up getting audited because I implemented some things that you warned me against doing that created a situation where we got audited and we had problems. And it took that for me to realize that everything that you were doing was to help us and to support me. And I'm really sorry that I didn't see that. And I was taken, it's like the first and only time that someone has come back and apologized in that way. And he was very sincere. And I accepted his apology. And I said, well, you know what? The truth is, you didn't know what you didn't know.
No.
And, and the other thing I said to him in the course of that apology is that I could have probably done a better job in helping you understand.
What we always it's always the yin and yang. We can
Mhm.
see all of it once we've healed from it, but like
Yeah,
there's that example of every big problem is due to a conversation that should have happened. You tried to have the conversation, but
yeah,
he wouldn't have. So that
right.
wasn't a conversation because he couldn't bear it. He could not
Yeah.
he couldn't engage because the conversation is not just a I'm the boss, here's what you need to do. That's not a conversation. That's a
Yeah.
demand. That's a,
Hmm.
but whenever you have a conversation, sometimes there is a little bit of tension and there's misunderstanding. And what do you mean by that? And here's why. There's some of that in a conversation. So every big problem can be traced back to a conversation that should have happened but didn't. So when someone
Yeah.
says, I told him 1,000 times, it wasn't a conversation. That
It
means
wasn't
you've
a
allowed
conversation.
something 999 times and you weren't willing to have the conversation about it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's so funny because I did not think about that until you just said that. That the
Mhm.
truth is it was a conversation that really just never happened.
You tried,
I
but
tried,
it's
but it
not
didn't
one
happen.
that's conversations aren't one way, and that's what we
Yeah.
often don't understand. A conversation is not someone cutting someone off. I'm done. There's a back and forth to a conversation. It's a considering what someone's saying and then making a conscious decision, which he didn't make a conscious decision to ignore what you said. He just decided you didn't have relevance. It
Yes.
wasn't even a conscious decision. He just thought, I know more and I'm going to do this. She's just trying to get in my way. So there was
Yes.
that going on, and you're like, he
Hmm.
won't listen to me. So it's blocked. There's no conversation
Yeah.
because there's no curiosity.
I love that. And I think that's a good note to end on is that I think a lot of times you're right. We assume we're having conversations and we forget conversations are two-way streets.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I wasn't having a conversation with him because he wasn't interested in
Wouldn't
engaging
do it.
with me.
Wouldn't do it.
So, I'm just speaking to the wind, not having a
Yeah.
conversation, which proves what you just said, that it's the conversation that didn't happen
If
that
they won't
created it.
engage, it's not a conversation. It's just a one-way
Absolutely.
demand or using authority or a statement, but it's not really a conversation.
Yeah, I love this. And I want to say thank you for doing this with me. And just from this conversation, I already have six different ideas of how to improve the next session. So I love this conversation so much. And I would love to do this again
Let's do it again.
sometimes.
Let's do it
And
once a
even,
quarter at least.
yes, 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 I would love to do this again. This was so fantastic, Marlene. Thank you so much for
Thanks
doing
for
this.
having me.
Yeah, and honestly, I know this is odd for those who are listening, but a lot of times I have these amazing conversations with amazing consultants and coaches and thought leaders. Marlene is a thought leader for sure. And I've always said, or that person has said to me, "Oh, I wish other people could hear this conversation." So
Now you
that's what
did
we're
it.
doing here. We're having people listen to the conversations, and hopefully you got something out of it as well.
I did. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Well, bye for now.